You're watching Philosophical Roast, today's brew, medium roast. The Kalam Cosmological Argument. Godless Engineer debunked.
The way that things are caused to exist now in the universe would be very different than what happened before the universe came into existence. So that same cause is not the exact same cause as we would know it now.
The most charitable understanding of this objection I could interpret would be the claim that causation as observed within the universe is in some sense different than causation as it applies to the universe itself. This objection would not object to any premise in the Kalam cosmological argument, nor the conclusion, as it does not deny the causation itself, but rather it merely questions the nature of the causation. However, this is a point that Dr. William Lane Craig not only addresses, but agrees with, because the causation of the universe is in at least some non-trivial respect, different from the causation we see within the universe. He argues that things which are caused to exist within the universe have both an efficient and a material cause, but that the universe could only have an efficient cause, as a material cause would be logically impossible given that matter could not exist without the universe, so long as the definition of universe is taken to include matter itself.
Shit doesn't just pop into existence, with the exception of virtual particles. Virtual particles do pop into existence.
Firstly, virtual particles don't come from nothing, they come from the quantum vacuum, which is a system having a rich physical substructure supporting a vast sea of roiling energy. Secondly, it isn't necessarily true that virtual particles do not have causes. From the fact that we don't know of an efficient cause, it doesn't follow that there isn't one. Thirdly, there is at least a material cause of virtual particles coming into existence, namely, the quantum vacuum. Fourthly, such an objection only applies if one presupposes an indeterministic interpretation of quantum theory, which itself presupposes that things can come into existence without a cause. However, if the first premise is true, then an indeterministic interpretation of quantum theory is not true. Any attempt to argue for an indeterministic interpretation of quantum theory based on the fact that we don't detect any causes would be to confuse our epistemology of causation with the ontology of causation. This objection can only be relevant if one first gives some evidence for an indeterministic interpretation of quantum theory, without which the objection is question-begging.
There are a number of assumptions that come with this particular argument. One is that self-causation is not possible. When we know that virtual particles exist, therefore, it's very probable that the universe could have just popped into existence, or it could have banged itself. There is a reason, or there is a cause out there that's possible that the universe could have banged itself.
In regards to self-causation and the popping into existence of virtual particles, I think there are three reasons why the objector's argument is implausible. Firstly, the denial of self-causation isn't merely an unwarranted assumption. Self-causation is denied because it's a logical impossibility, because in order for something to cause itself to exist, it must first exist as to cause itself to exist. There are two problems with this. First, if the cause exists, then it wouldn't need to cause itself to exist because it already exists. Second, in the causally prior state, the cause would have to both exist and not exist simultaneously, which is logically incoherent. Secondly, earlier the objector seemed to imply that virtual particles don't have causes, whereas now he is arguing for self-causation. The problem here is that self-causation presupposes a cause, which is itself. But this is in direct contradiction with the claim that there is not a cause. Thirdly, to argue that if things inside the universe can pop into existence, then therefore the universe itself can pop into existence is to commit the fallacy of composition. Just because something applies inside the universe, doesn't mean it necessarily applies to the universe itself.
Another assumption that this particular argument makes is that the transcendent cause that he's mentioning is a very specific view of God. So like him arguing as a Christian, he would be arguing for the existence of the Christian God. A Muslim would be arguing for the existence of Allah. So you have these people that are making these arguments, but they're arguing them for a certain kind of God. So they have this very unique idea of the God that they think exists.
This objection claims that the argument doesn't argue for any specific God. However, the Kalam cosmological argument isn't an argument for religious particularism, but an argument for a generic form of theism or of classical theism, and is compatible with several different expressions of religious particularism. Such an argument would argue for the existence of a personal cause of the universe and is neutral in respect to the nature or intention of the cause. It should be noted that given the contradictory nature of varying religions, all religions can't all be true, but they all could be false. However, if this argument is sound, then all religions aren't false and at least one religion is true. Considering the fact that this objection does not deny the first premise nor the second, it would seem to concede the conclusion, and by extension theism, and merely complain that we don't know which God it argues for, which was never the contention of the argument in the first place.
One of the fallacies that this particular argument makes is special pleading. Special pleading is where you make a special case for something that lies outside of all of the other cases. You might point back to my virtual particles thing as being a special case, but not so much when you consider quantum physics and how that works. It's not so much a special case as just one example of how quantum physics works. But this transcendent cause that he mentions, he specially pleads for it by saying that he lies outside of the need to be caused or to have a creator.
First of all, this objection simply misunderstands the second premise. The premise is not that everything which exists has a cause, but that everything which begins to exist has a cause. However, if God exists, then God could not begin to exist because as the cause of the universe, time did not exist before the universe began to exist. Secondly, if one believes that all causation is temporal, which I deny, then there can be no time at which God could be caused since God is eternal. This implies that as the cause of space and time, there is no time at which God did not exist and therefore, no time at which God could be caused. Thirdly, this refutation is a complete red herring, as it neither denies the first nor the second premise and as such, it does not deny the conclusion by any means.
Another fallacy that this commits is the fallacy of composition, saying that just because everything in the universe needs a cause, that means that everything in the universe needs a cause.
Not gonna argue with that.
But there are a few things in this universe that don't need a cause, like for instance the virtual particles. Those are an example of something that doesn't need a cause. Another one is radioactive decay. We don't understand how certain atoms are selected to decay into other elements, but we do know that it happens, and we don't know how that's selected. As best as we can tell, it's randomly selected. So those would be two real examples of how it breaks this whole idea that everything in this universe has a cause.
First, it isn't necessarily true that virtual particles and radioactive decay do not have causes. From the fact that we don't know of a cause, it doesn't follow that there isn't one. Secondly, there is at least a material cause for both virtual particles and alpha particles per radioactive decay, namely, the quantum vacuum and the atomic nucleus respectively. Thirdly, as mentioned earlier, both cases presuppose an indeterministic interpretation of quantum theory which is question-begging. Deterministic theories of quantum theory would hold that both cases in question have causes. Looks like that was all the objections lodged in that video. Thanks for watching. Until next roast.